This is episode 75 of Real Occult, where we apply numerology and astrology to the material world. Today, we are discussing preparing your kids for their inheritance. Or if you're a kid yourself, or you're a grown adult who is preparing to receive some inheritance, this applies as well. So let's jump right into it. If you are unaware, I currently run a 150 plus family before school and after school program. So I'm hanging out with 30 some kids in the morning and over 80 kids in the afternoons. Before that, I was an in-home hospice caretaker for 2 years. And so I've been working with families, kids, and the death process for multiple years now. I also used to give numerology and astrology readings for families going through the hospice experience. And so death, families, kids, money, investments, all of this stuff I have been enthralled with, been living with for multiple years now. I went to school, double majored finance and accounting, thought I was going to go work on Wall Street and asset management. So I've been involved with this type of thing for years and years and years now. And one of the biggest things I see happen all the time is parents afraid or unsure about how to approach these types of conversations with their kids. And that can be a grown kid, an adult kid, or a teenager, or even like middle school, elementary school child. And so preparing the family for what is the end goal, how much are you going to get, how are we going to utilize this money within the family dynamic, what type of role does whatever the vehicle is that's getting passed on play. So that could be cash, that could be investments, that could be homes, cars, what have you. And so whatever it is you choose to pass on or are preparing to receive. And so what role does that item play within the family dynamics? And what role does that play within the individual itself who's getting ready to receive it? And so some families, taking a step back when it comes to family dynamics themselves, some families are full of supporting connections. The mom learned something which positively ties in with the youngest son who now gets that experience, who then passes it to the oldest kid, who then teaches dad something, which now teaches mom. And they have this positive feedback loop where every single member of the family, as they grow and progress, every other person is along for the ride, and they also grow and progress. Other families, which I see all the time, is conflicting connections, very karmic connections for hardship, challenge as the initiator for growth. And so mom learns something which now creates tension with youngest child, which creates tension with older kid, which creates tension with dad, which now creates more tension with mom. And this is a negative feedback loop. And so these things can be refining, they can be slightly off balance. Well, it doesn't necessarily matter exactly the dynamic because everything is individualized for the family itself. But what type of connection does the family unit have? Is this a positive feedback loop or is this a negative feedback loop? And what role does that item that's getting passed on play within the individual who's receiving it, play within their bigger picture spiritual purpose? And so here is a real life example. You have a positive feedback loop, family dynamic, and we're just going to break them down into two dynamics just to keep things simple as simple as I can. So we have the positive positive feedback loop dynamic. We'll have the negative feedback loop dynamic. In reality, everything is a combination of the two. It's just which one is it more? Is it more positive feedback or is it more negative feedback loop? But everybody has both of them within the chart, which is how we progress and grow through challenge, hardships, obstacles, barriers, all of these things. And so a positive feedback loop, family dynamic, where the asset getting passed on will be, we'll call it a piece of real estate. Now we would take a peek at the foundational layers of the person who's receiving it. So that will be the birth chart itself, that foundational layer of karma, and the middle layer, the current layer of karma, meaning the active transits that they are currently experiencing. So in this positive feedback loop environment, family dynamic, we would look at the heirs or the beneficiaries, 4th house, 8th house, and whatever's currently active within their current transits. And so you can have a family dynamic where everything is positive within this bigger picture, but real estate itself within that individual's foundational layer is a hardship, challenge, obstacle, or barrier. And so once the bigger picture family dynamic shifts through the passing of the older family members, the younger person, the heir or the beneficiary, once they come into stewardship of that asset, they come into ownership of it, they now are in control of that. That creates a challenge, obstacle, or barrier for them to overcome. They're going to have to learn through that. And so you'd have to look at the chart itself and the actual active energies at the time, but that could be hardship, challenge, obstacle, barrier through having to step up and take on the increased responsibility. That could be that hardship, challenge, obstacle, or barrier occurring through escapism. And so when I was younger and I was going to college, I had one of my friends, one of his fraternity mates, received a massive windfall, super huge inheritance. And it was, I think it might have been all cash or 90-some% cash, a large majority of it in just pure cash, and not investments that are giving off dividends, just raw cash itself, look, pure cash. And talking to him, this dude hated seeing his parents' money in his account. He's like, this is not mine. He was in that escapist mentality. And so this dude was just spending, ended up catching a drug charge, ended up getting kicked out of school. Now he has a criminal record. He's no longer in school, was expelled from school, and burned through a vast majority of his inheritance, all through attempting to escape the pain of losing a family member, which he was completely unprepared for, spiritually a mess through this instance, and had this financial windfall that he was now in control of and was not prepared to handle that responsibility. So he's unprepared for the responsibility of managing a massive increase in energy, which is just what the cash represented, was the stored value of his entire lineage's energy inputs. For Newton's third law, for every input, we get an equal and opposite output. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Two forces playing on each other. And so as he was experiencing this massive upgrade in responsibility, he was attempting to escape. And you could have predicted this, which given this, and they also, taking us even step further back, I don't know through the charts themselves, but just from what I have gathered and knowing peripherally enough to make an assessment, this was more so a negative feedback loop dynamic. And so the removal of the guardian now created the stewardship of a massive increase in energy, which the beneficiary was unprepared for. And so knowing that dynamic, knowing what was expected to happen through the escapist mentality, it would have been much better off to lock those down in an irrevocable trust and get some cash dividends off of that or whatever. Create a schedule for withdrawal so that you can manage that escapist tendency along with slowly increasing the amount of responsibility you're giving to the child, to the kid. And he was a little bit older than me, so at the time he probably would have been like 19, 20, right in there, as he's experiencing this unexpected windfall. And so going back to the positive family dynamic, within a positive family dynamic, you can have positive where as the stewardship gets passed on to the beneficiary, this creates another positive feedback loop. This breathes life into the person receiving it. Just like you can have a negative feedback loop dynamic where passing on the stewardship to the next generation is a positive feedback dynamic event. This now sets off a new chain because everyone fulfilled their karmic role. And so I think we're just going to wrap this up here in a minute after I make this last point. Every single family dynamic is the way it is supposed to be, because you are supposed to have those experiences refine you so that big picture you can ultimately fulfill the role you're meant to fulfill for the universe as a whole, for society as a whole. And so that goes for the parent and the child. Both people are supposed to be within this dynamic because both people are supposed to learn their lessons. Saturn's slogan: there is no escaping the lessons we are meant to learn in this lifetime. So if you were in a negative feedback loop dynamic growing up, you chose, now this gets into a personal belief of mine, that your spirit, your soul chose to be born into this dynamic, into this unit, so that you can get all of the experiences you have to have in order to fulfill that role for society and the universe. And that goes for the positive and the negative. Because the thing is, taking a step back, big picture wise, material things, material belongings, assets are simply one aspect of this game. And they're a way to measure our own spiritual growth and development, because you are only able to manage and control the things which you are energetically capable of managing and controlling. Just like in the gym, your body, bodybuilding wise now, I used to run a kinesiology business where we help people improve their posture. And so the body will only manage the amount of meat in this meat suit that it is capable of. You'll never get too big for your body to actually be able to move. And so you could look at the 600-pound life type of experience, and that person's supposed to have that experience. They're supposed to be pushing themselves to that edge to learn whatever lesson it is they're supposed to learn. It could be a lesson around greed and that hunger monster. It could be a lesson around humility. It could be a lesson around who knows what. It's all specific to that person. You could have two people in the same exact family dynamic from the same family, both of them 600 plus pounders, and the lessons they're supposed to learn through that experience can be different. And so you were born into the dynamic you were born into for a reason. Now, the only question becomes, do you acknowledge and grow from those experiences? Or is the universe going to have to continue to increase the intensity and variety of experiences it delivers you so that you ultimately do learn your lesson and change your actions moving forward? I hope that makes sense. I'm going to wrap this up here. We're already at 15 minutes, and I wanted to keep this like a 10-minute thing. The whole point is every single family dynamic is unique. Some of them are positive feedback loop dynamics. Some of them are negative feedback loop dynamics. When it comes to preparing for passing on inheritance or preparing to receive inheritance, you can look at these dynamics and examine whether or not the act of inheritance itself, the act of receiving, the act of passing on, is itself a positive or negative feedback loop dynamic within the overarching family dynamic. And so there are different layers to these, which is why I always use a multi-layered system. Most people, they look at one layer and say, oh, this is true here. So if you just think of occult studies and you break them down into sections, numerology, there's two different main forms of numerology, Pythagorean and Chaldean. Numerology, we have astrology, Vedic, and Western astrology in general, not medieval astrology and all of these other types, but Vedic and Western, you have Chinese astrology. And so numerology, the two types, astrology, the two types, Western and Vedic, and then you have Chinese astrology. What I like to do is layer all of them on top of each other, and if the energetic assessment is true in one or two layers but is completely absent in the others, I don't put a lot of faith or stock into it. However, if we have an energetic assessment, this type of thing is true in both forms of numerology. It's true in both forms, Western and Vedic astrology, and it's true in your Chinese astrology. I put a ton of faith and stock into that assessment because it's true on so many different layers and true from so many different angles of these occult studies that it has to be true. It must be true. If every single one of these different layers is saying the same thing, it's probably close to the real truth, the reality of the circumstance or whatever. And so layer up your charts, figure out, actually, you know what? I did a podcast not too long ago on family dynamics themselves. Let me see what number that was. Family dynamics. I did one in Chinese astrology, episode number 69, season 2, episode 8, full episode number 69. That's probably the best one. I think I did another one earlier. Episode 51, Family is an Asset, season 1, episode 51. That's another one. Season 1, episode 49, so Big Picture, episode number 49. Those three, if you're interested in learning more about family dynamics. Actually, every family dynamic is unique, episode 74, season 2, episode 13. So those episodes will give you more insight into the family dynamic stuff. Layer up your charts, take a peek at your family dynamic. Is it a positive feedback loop? Is it a negative feedback loop? How does what type of role does the inheritance itself play within the overarching big picture family dynamic? And what role does the asset being transferred play within the receiver, the beneficiary, or the heirs? Spiritual purpose. We'll just call it that. What role does that asset play within their spiritual purpose? So within their foundational, current, and created layers of karma. I hope you got something out of this. I'm probably going to continue to talk more and more about the inheritance stuff. It blends so many different things that I enjoy together. It blends the family dynamics and working with families. It blends together the whole hospice experience that I had and went through and enjoy helping people work through themselves. And it brings together the finance and asset management, all of that type of stuff, which is what I originally went to school thinking I was going to be doing before starting the kinesiology business and then going into hospice and then working with 150 some families. And now we're here. And I think I'm going to blend all three of them together and talk more and more and maybe specialize in the inheritance area of numerology and astrology and the occult. If you have any questions, you can always send me an email, tristan@realoccult.com. We also have a free Skool community, skool.com/realoccult. It's completely free. We help parents spiritually prepare their kids for their inheritance. And I think that's what we're going to be focusing on moving forward. That's skool.com/realoccult. If you made it this far, I genuinely appreciate you for listening. The universe is on your side. The universe wants you to win. I also want you to win, and I will talk to you again soon.